Okay, anyway, so thank you all for being here. The idea behind this is quite simple, really. To create a genuine conversation around some of the topics that I think deserve more visibility and discussion across the facade industry. So it's not a panel discussion. This is not a presentation, just an honest conversation between people who see the industry from slightly different perspectives. We've got perspectives represented to vary from contracting, from systems, materials, sustainability. So hopefully there'll be a few differing opinions around the table. My role really today is to simply host and guide the discussion and keep things moving whilst making sure everyone's perspective is really heard. So if we're honest, is the facade industry generally prepared for the life cycle challenges facing existing facades over the coming decades? John, perhaps I'll start with you.
I think we are. If I go back to say 5 or 6 years ago, where the CWCT, the Centre for Window and Cladding Technology, we had a very honest and robust conversation about where the industry was at, and we challenged ourselves, and we realized that probably the capability and where the industry was at wasn't quite, we weren't ready then. And the challenge was to look at education and to see how we could all get to start talking the same language on the same knowledge level. And I think over the last 5 years, we've got to a point where we're pretty good now, you know. So and Casey works in the CWCT now, and she's doing a fabulous job. And you know, the amount of publications that are out there is great. So you know, on that level, I think we're doing quite well. If we look at a global basis, I think we're doing really well. We're ahead of certain other regions around the world. But then maybe there's other areas that we're not so great at. So, and I'm sure that'll come out in discussion as well. So, but in general, I think we're in a pretty good place. But there's always things we can do better.
Sure. David, what's your perspective on that?
I think the reality, I think very much the sort of the studying, the theoretical side, and some of the practical side is definitely advancing. And I think we have come a long way, certainly within the last 3 years. I would say I would still feel practically we're a long way away from actually working on a scale. I think that's where I'd end up with it. And I don't think people are really prepared for it enough. And there's lots of discussion about design for deconstruct, lots of discussions about reuse or recycle. It's just, there's lots of issues around there. And I think, and everybody's trying, which is the brilliant positive thing, sure. And it's the right thing to do. But you know, the potential out there is huge. And what we're actually doing is relatively small. What's actually happening is relatively minor compared to the size of what's there. So yeah, I think we're realistic about the progress we've made.
Okay.
But also realistic about the progress we haven't yet made.
Okay.
Excellent.
So, Saverio, do you agree with what you were saying?
I tend to agree more with David. I think John is right with what John said in terms of the educational piece. You know, John, we spoke about that before. You contributed to a book where you made that very clear. That has advanced a lot. We have really invested in CWCT as an industry. The terminology is changing, and we're all far more conversant with the topics. But when it comes to the whole story, I think there's quite a lot more to do.
Okay.
In fact, I was fine saying that there's a tremendous amount of things to do. Just by way of example, we always focus on module A. What about the other modules? B, C, and D. So we should perhaps start from D and thinking about the end of the story. How are we going to reuse the materials that we put together today and inform the whole thing? I don't think we're doing that enough.
Okay.
So I think that, so the education and the knowledge, certainly the focus has changed a lot. Also, in fairness, John, also thanks to you and today in particular, you were really at the forefront of how the whole industry discussion. So that's changed. I think as an industry, we need to shift our focus from circularity per se. So materials, so underneath glass, just
We'll come on to circularity.
to the whole circular economy piece. And that is what encompasses the whole discussion.
Okay.
And until we've done that, we're not quite there.
Okay, Katie, do you see it differently to what
No, I think
guys are saying?
I think I agree with everyone. You know, the standards are there, policies are getting there, the calculation frameworks. We're all talking the same language. But I do think that there is a weakness in the quality of data that we have to support that and actually implement it at scale. So I think where we've got high-risk buildings, we've got the golden thread, we've got major projects within London that are requiring those circular economy statements and so forth, and they're having to prove that data. That's great, but that isn't the wider majority of people work in the UK. You know, how do we bring that to those smaller scale projects?
Okay. And Benedikt, from a sort of systems perspective, how do you see it?
Well, both from a systems and a general perspective, I agree with everyone in the room here, but it's good to see level of optimism. But I think we are surrounded here by companies and associations that are really pioneering in that space, that are invest in that space, quite selflessly invest, because you really need to have skin in the game, have full conviction behind it, because it doesn't immediately materialize and generate profit. So I think what we are all seeing, and very representative for this group, is there's still a lot of everything is based on accountability. Companies and associations hold each other accountable. That's where it works, where main contractors, architects, planners, and associations, they support it out of their own intrinsic and ethical vision for what it needs to be, necessity of what it needs to deliver. I think what we all still need to see is how legislation follows that. You see more initiation or more initiative from the industry, really, and legislation in both ways, incentivizing it but also penalizing it. I think there's not enough of that yet to really drive that change at scale. I think this was the general consensus here, that there are pockets, but the scale just isn't there yet. The puzzle pieces have not fully fallen into each other.
Sure. Okay. Well, a number of you have already touched on the idea of long-term thinking, which leads to the next question. So, John, from your perspective, are we generally designing, procuring and constructing facades with their full life cycle in mind? Or are we still too focused on cost first and project completion?
I think cost will always be there, and can't get away from that. And what we've seen in our sustainability journey, I think over the last definitely 5 to 6 years, is we've moved from, let's say, from a cost perspective, where there would have been a premium associated with sustainability initiatives. That's moved to maybe a position where it's cost neutral. And I think when you get to a cost neutrality position, then it starts to become the norm. But the drivers have to be the clients, you know, so or the driver needs to be regulation. And I kind of see that being a bigger issue, to Benedikt's point. But going back to, I suppose, your question in terms of you know, are we designing properly? I think we're starting to, you know, that the whole design to deconstruct area is getting better. But again, I think in everything we're going to talk about this morning, there will be more to do. There will be more to do, and that is the case, you know. But sure, but again, you have to have the knowledge base, not just from a design perspective, but from a implementation and delivery perspective. Everybody has to be on the same page, and I still come back to education, and I think we are starting to get that level playing field now. Well, mostly down to the work that Katie's doing now in the CWCT, but you know, I think we're really getting there. But I go back to this thing about client driven. And I go back to conversations I had with David 5-6 years ago, when he was starting on his glass journey, where do we start? And you kind of have to start with the clients, you know,
Right.
if they don't drive it, then how do you get adoption?
Sure.
That's an interesting one, because it's that, especially with large clients where you've got kind of, where is their portfolio facade intelligence? You know, they're very interested in their EPC rating, they're very interested in their GIA, they're very interested in their leasing profile, but the same degree of attention that those get should be on the residual value of facades, fire classification, disassembly and reuse potentials.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right.
All right. Good.
So just to add to this, from a developer perspective, I guess it often also depends on the commercial intention behind the development in the first place. What's the business model behind it? What drives incentive? Again, not leaving legislation behind, but what's the future use of the building, and when do I consider as a developer the building to be complete? When has it delivered the value? And the discussion we're having today is that the delivery of the final value is not that handover. The value needs to carry on of the building life cycle, right? And we talked previously about the analog nature of how buildings are built, and they're currently more like disposable cameras, right? You build them and they're done, they serve the purpose, then let's hope they last, but they need to be upgradable, and you need to reflect this, as you said, in the design already. So they need to be designed to dismantle, to decarb, and to be upgraded. So the long-term incentive is probably still to be defined for developers.
So are the right life cycle questions then being asked?
Yes, yeah. And again, there's only pockets of this, I think. Some lead the way in this, but there's very little pressure from the entire industry to jointly go in this direction.
Saverio, what does good life cycle thinking actually look like?
So before I answer that, mind if I intercede on some of the things
Please do.
you said? So are we really designing, at the beginning I said things about module D, like think about, are we really designing with that in mind? I think that's really the core of the whole story. I think there's tension there for that, regardless of any aspiration. Because there's a question about accountability. So who really owns that life cycle? That's a big question. And you can break it down into the various players, but really, who owns the whole life of that facade may be an answer, not a clear answer. But also, I think the tension is there where we design for buildings. The design that we typically do are very building specific. And there's an increased complexity in the design of our buildings, right? And in addition to that, if you put the two together, if you think about, very often we design by elevation to respond to certain challenges that every elevation of the building has, or neighboring buildings, current and even future. So all that complexity, and I'm oversimplifying that, doesn't help having a facade that it is reusable, first of all, and along dismantleable, at the end of its life. And so when we think about, are we really designing the core of your question? Really design with that in mind. The questions are there. Okay, you said, the questions are there, right? But are the answers there? Because I think we ask ourselves, we got that in mind, but I don't think that we are shifting the design towards the end game. So we should be letting that drive the design as opposed to, what attracts that complexity, what the driver is, right? And then there's also the additional tension of, do you want to make it more efficient now for the user now? Versus, is it more important to make it more, recyclable, reusable at the end? So which one wins? I think that is a very important aspect when you have to answer the question.
Okay. I mean, David, how does that sort of look from a glass point of view?
Very transparent, as always. Very good.
Well played.
I do think we need to define the fact that we're probably all talking about the commercial market here. Because we have a very different strategy for residential, which we'll call single-family dwellings. And there's obviously government buildings, be it hospitals or whatever. And obviously, really, that's going to take legislation to drive those things, I think, for deep change. But when it comes to commercial property, it's a different situation because they've got a building to market. got to get the right tenants in. Tenants are more savvy about operational carbon, but they want to sell, the embodied carbon story as well, because it's becoming more important to people. Responsible sourcing, buildings as material banks. These are all the sort of things that people are starting to become more aware of, even as tenants in buildings.
Yeah.
So I think, I think in even as having this discussion together, I think we're all really talking about the commercial marketplace, which is very different. And it's probably a relatively small part of the overall construction marketplace for glass, for aluminium, for other materials, because it's quite niche. It may be 20%, 25% of the marketplace, but that's where we find the clients that see this as something important. And obviously the amount of effort they'll make is really dependent on what they feel they get out of it.
Sure.
So the question always is, why would they do it? Why would they bother to do it? And I think if we can answer the question why for people first, then we'll find what will motivate them to do it.
Well, but their stock are assets, and they need to upgrade their assets to make sure they're fit for purpose.
Yes, but that will also be driven by, if you're in central London, and we've got a job right now. We put the glass on. A facade was done in early 2000s, and tenants moving out. The building probably could go for another 5 years, maybe 10 years before the unit started failing. But the client goes, do I really want to be replacing glass all over a building when I've got a new tenant? Maybe they signed up to 10 years, 15 years. So the life cycle assessment, which is actually where you started the question, is actually driven by the letting cycle more than the life cycle assessment of the building.
Right.
But that's their motivation. And it may be different for different people. So, and that still brings you back to my point of, is what is the critical issue for somebody when they're looking at whatever the topic is. But in terms of sustainability, the question is, why would the client do it? What is their motivation?
Sure.
And once we understand their motivation, then we can drive the solutions of what it might be. And it's just not a one-size-fits-all situation in the commercial marketplace. And if you've got a low-cost building out of town somewhere, you wouldn't have the same care as a prime location right outside Liverpool Street Station. Because your income is totally different. Your income is totally different.
Unless it is a regulation requirement, unless it is code driven.
Yeah.
In which case that would drive. So perhaps we need to start from the values first. So why do you do it? Remember having a discussion with you, and said, why do we want to do it? Because you said, John, because we want to live a better world for our kids, right? That's, that's a generational conversation. So there's a social value there. And then you move into, so are we going to bring it all together? There's regulatory framework. And that is very, very important because it makes people buying into it, even if they don't want to buy into it. That's a really important aspect, isn't it? Yeah. Because if there's law there, if there's even guidance, you could argue, even simple, strong, approved document guidance, then people will have to comply with that. Even those who may not want to comply with it, that could shift it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what you think. I mean, if the government is saying, net zero strategy, then you're never going to get that. You need to set a target, right?
I mean, if you think about toughened glass, safety glass, right? So back in the 70s and 60s, people were being killed when they fell through plate glass, Regulation changed. People had to use safety glass, If that never came in, if that regulation never came in, would people still be using plate glass indoors? And for a cost saving, I think they would. People were forced down a certain route. I think that's where I feel from a government perspective where we're failing. I really do feel that there should be regulation there, even when we look at how bad, let's say in the States, we think things are going. In California, they've still got the the green initiative where they have embodied carbon targets, not targets, regulations. So there's certain things where I feel we need to do better, and that's 100%. There are other countries around the world that have legislated, and we haven't.
And legislation will drive the developers, because we're sticking commercial.
Yeah.
It will drive the developers that don't want to do it.
Correct.
Because it's only the ones that got the high value estate that it's worth them following a sustainability journey in detail. And that's the issue. You know, you start pushing this outside of central London, it starts thinning out very quickly. And so that's where legislation happens.
Correct.
But within central London, you've got a lot of developers who are all looking at each other.
Yeah.
So it's the fear of missing out is more of a driver. I mean, legislation would help, but I'm afraid I wish I felt more confident in legislation coming to save us, but the cavalry's not coming over the horizon just yet, shall we say?
It's not.
You know,
it's not. And maybe what we're doing here will have some.
Need to get absolutely made it come. You need to ask somewhere.
get our placards and get into Westminster.
And perhaps it is on us to drive that.
Yeah.
Perhaps it is on us to drive that change. I mean, industry bodies especially.
Yes.
I think the other danger with that, though, is being too prescriptive with it. If you put embodied carbon targets, you don't want to potentially dismiss the opportunity of reducing carbon further down the line in a secondary or tertiary refurbishment strategy. You know, if you make them too tight, you may miss the opportunity for a change of use.
Yes,
and things like that.
adaptability.
So how do you build that narrative into a kind of flexible?
well, I guess the thing is, with most standards, they're inclusive, they're not exclusive. Yeah, they're trying to get people in rather than keep people out.
Yeah.
So either whether you make it then stepped, you know, you get the platinum award, the gold, the bronze, you know, or the rubber or something at the bottom there, you know, whatever the lowest score of life is. I don't know, but
Like if we got to start somewhere, you know.
It's like, going back to what Saverio was saying earlier about responsibility. I mean, if we're told everyone is responsible, is anybody then actually responsible if we're told everyone is?
So, yes, I mean, it's perhaps the question is about accountability rather than responsibility.
Okay.
Because responsibility, you can have different people responsible for certain things, but accountability, one person, one body. Who's that?
Who is that?
Who is that person? Because, you know, you supply the glass, you're responsible, the one state, the designer, responsible for the designer, we build it, you provide that, okay, and then we end up with a facade, and it is now with the client. Who owns the life cycle of that facade, you know, for 60 years? Considering buildings are being sold, even, I don't even want to get into shortening the life cycle to 25 years for a facade that is 60, living along that complexity, added complexity, you know, but who really owns that? Because can we pinpoint that ownership, that accountability?
Yeah, but there does have to be a step change, and yes, we're looking at a step change in our industry at the moment with the Building Safety Act, and that
You took perfect example.
a dreadful occurrence to happen to make that happen. Sure, but if we challenged ourselves and said, could we have implemented things that are within the Building Safety Act without the act actually coming into being, I think we'd say no. You know, we wouldn't have the mechanism to do that. But the Building Safety Act is a fabulous example of where the industry was pushed out of its comfort zone, and now we're in the implementation phase of something that I think is really good. You know,
That's a really good point. The other thing is that, but in list my opinions, I don't know if you agree, without getting sucked into the Building Safety Act discussion, it does nothing more but to tell us what we should be doing anyway. So it goes back to that. So we're expecting someone to tell us what to do when in fact we should be already doing that.
Yeah.
The same applies to sustainability and circularity, right? We should be doing that anyway. We don't need anyone, but perhaps what we do need to really make it happen is for someone to tell us.
Okay, well, that probably leads us on to maintenance and repair, because there's little point talking about life cycle if we're not maintaining these buildings properly. So, Saverio, back to you. Are we intervening? True. Are we intervening at the right time, or are we too often waiting until problems become unavoidable before we take action?
No, I don't think we are. Not for what I can see. If you just change the subject of the sentence from facade to car, you don't treat a facade like you treat a car, right? But you don't wait for your car to just break even. You just go and you have it checked. You have an MOT every so often. You maintain it properly before it breaks down, right? But we seem to be doing the opposite, where you wait until it breaks and then you think that's maintenance. That's not maintenance. That's prepared. And by the way, when we talk about facades, which starts with cleaning and maintenance, it's not the glass. It's the whole facade. And they're very complex machines. You know, they are as complex as cars, right? Or more.
Wouldn't it be fabulous if your facade, every bay of your facade effectively had its own MOT history as a way of having it sort of its material passport?
I just wanted to say that while I fully agree with you, it's way too reactive. But in fairness to the building, the car is much smarter. The car has sensors. The car is very digitalized nowadays. The car communicates to you and is very preventative in terms of something's coming up.
Service me now.
Well, exactly.
Hello, 5 miles till you need a service.
So that's true. The window doesn't do it. The window facade or whatever, the building generally doesn't communicate with you. So the only time that we see something needs to happen is when it's too late, when it leaks, when there's a complaint from a tenant. So I believe we need to get to that point where the building becomes smarter. And there is very visible, transparent documentation of what's in it, what has been done, what is the cycle and the cadence that it does need to be maintained to stay in proper shape. So all of us need to contribute to this, right? But it's again a matter of being proactive about it and not reactive.
Who should ultimately make those type of decisions? Who's responsible for making that type of decision?
I believe currently it's, again, all of us. It's about accountability. But the question is what drives that, the incentive of holding each other accountable.
Right.
So I believe typically it should come from the very top, from the guys that pay the bill at the end of the day. So it needs to come from the developers,
Right.
the owners. They're incentivized by legislation. So it always has to start from the top. I don't want to make this about developers' responsibility, but I think all of us coming from the supply chain or from the design or from the industry, currently it feels like a lot of it is bottom-up responsibility.
Right.
And we're feeding into this from a vision of what we think the world should look like, being a good ancestor, to follow up on your point. And that works, but at scale, this is still falling very short.
Okay. And John?
I'm really disappointed in Benedikt,
As always.
because Katie just said, wouldn't it be great if facade had the ability to tell you when its MOT was, and you have a system like that within your...
We do.
Yeah.
You set a promotional video here, Si. What do you do? You want to respect the forum.
Product.
You're so modest.
But so there are systems there to do that. But what has a driver? Yeah.
But I think this is the challenge. It's just like, I just can't tell you how many meetings I've sat in where we've discussed really good things, really important things, but we just feel like we're so far away from the implementation of them. That's true. And that's the thing that kind of grates with me. I love the initiatives. I love people who think out the box, challenges. But the thing that grates with me is another year passes, another year passes, another year passes. And so I think I still come back to what can we do? What's in our hands today that we can do something with today that makes a difference? And can that grow? And it is bottom up, and it shouldn't be, but that's what we've got. And so I'm stuck between those two places. So I feel the frustration of banging my head on the ceiling that we can't move faster because the legislation is not pushing it.
Professor, yours to say that.
John mentioned something extremely important. He mentioned education. And whilst I'm super excited about the innovation and technology aspects of what you are referring to, and I truly believe that is, in a way, still it could be considered a reactive approach. We need to educate people that that's what you need to do. So if you turn back time 25 years ago, and again, we changed the subject of the sentence from facade to cars, we used to maintain cars. In fact, you could argue that we used to maintain them even better because they were easier to maintain, they were easier to repair.
complex.
Right. So they were not as complex as that. So, and whilst, an electric car these days can tell you when you need to go and do something before it happens, there's nothing stopping us every year to check the tire pressure on our own, right? In fact, you could also tag along the regulatory framework where you are required to have an MOT every year, right?
All right.
Well, what's stopping us, for saying every year, every 2 years, you need to check it. Our O&M manuals, we as council was becoming really strict about what goes into an O&M manual. And if it's not just about you need to maintain the door, you need to tell what is it you actually need to do on that door. Is it the hinge? Is it the lock? Is it the beads? Okay, whatever it is. Okay, so it is relatively easy in a way to implement those things, to put them there so that they can happen. You have the information to make it happen, including data these days. We have no excuses, but it is a mind shift that we need to introduce in terms of, I know how to do it and I can do it and I'm designing so that I can do it and I'm actually going to be doing it.
Yeah.
If you do that, then your life is extended.
The O&M manuals are really important for that, and having that data there so people can refer to it. And you also need to have that live aspect. There needs to be kind of a live risk register of direct for the facade of
Indeed.
visible defects, of potential statutory risks if things change.
Yeah.
And someone has to be responsible for reviewing that and making sure that maintenance
I agree.
and repairs are done and that's kept up. And there should be some sort of regulation that is being seen.
But I think I think there is, and I think the Building Safety Act is kind of starting to open up as that's true piece of work, So it's you've got live and updated documentation around safety and risk, and I think the penny is dropping with lots of people that all of this is opening up into a much wider conversation. So it's not just about cleaning the windows. It's then
Or the glass.
or the glass, or but then we all know that there's issues with open out windows. It's a big topic within the industry at the moment, and do they need to be maintained? What do we need to do for one not to fail? And so there's a safety aspect to this, and I think as we all become more familiar with the Building Safety Act, this will become more apparent.
A great opportunity. All right.
Are these processes that are more, the frameworks being put there for relevant and high risk buildings? Is it that we need to start prescribing that to other building types as well?
Yeah.
But certainly there's nothing stopping you from doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good practice, you could have it.
Okay. I mean, a common word that has come up is circularity. Is everyone talks about circularity? How close are we really to making this practical in reality?
You're right. A lot of people talk about it. Everyone talks about it. A lot of lip service behind it still. Surely we have come much further than we were 5 to 10 years ago. But circularity is a lot about infrastructure, creating an ecosystem. So it's not plug and play. It's not surely nothing that can be commoditized. And it is driven again bottom up, from the industry, from industry players like Saint-Gobain, like Schüco. But we need to really invest in that infrastructure. We need to partner with each other, with other companies. We own our own recycling company called Recore, and it's then about creating your own destiny and partnering up with the right companies, feeding your own material into that closed loop again.
Okay.
But it's also about getting the material in the first place and knowing what is the material when you take it off. And then we go back to the initial point about how transparent is the facade and the building. So that's where it's really all connected. So we can talk about all of these separate topics like sustainability and embodied carbon and maintenance. But when you talk about circularity, that's why it is circular, because it really looks at the whole loop. So long story short, we have come a long way, but definitely there still is a long way to go.
David, what are we getting wrong on this?
That's a good question. I mean, again, within the commercial sphere, but also it's this concept of the reverse supply chain, because everyone understands the supply chain moving in that direction. And this was the whole thing when we started engaging with clients 3.5 years ago. That's what they said. They said there is no reverse supply chain. So how is it actually going to happen? So I think that's the challenge. How we make the reverse supply chain work. It's even more so. It's like when you buy a facade on a building, it has real value and it costs a lot of money. When you want to take it off, it's rubbish.
Right.
It has a rubbish value, has a scrap value. So everything that the raw material value is just a small part of when you put it on, because it's all processed, it's all cut, it's anodized, it's coated, so all the value goes into the processing, and all the processing becomes the obstacle for the recycling. Double glazed unit, it's 2 bits of glass glued together. It's a pain in the ass, So everything we've done that brings the value, then it becomes the problem.
Right.
So that reverse supply chain has to overcome those issues in a time and cost method to make circularity work for the client.
Sure.
And if you can't make the time cost thing add up in a way that is going to tick the box, it's just not going to happen.
Right. Okay. Katie?
Again, an interesting one. I feel like it has come a long way, and things like the circularity statement applied by the London plan is a great one.
Yes.
But I think what David says is right about that high value recovery. So the circularity statement aims for a 95% recovery. That can be reuse, refurbishment, recycling. And I think because it's a one figure statement, it hides that lower value recovery of recycling. We should be aiming to keep it in its highest form.
Do you talk about within the London plan?
Within the
circularity statement?
Yes. So trying to keep things in that current state rather than going through that recycling process, like you say, that has so many issues with it.
Okay.
So I think what is what is interesting with the London plan is this for the client and whoever is about getting planning permission.
Right.
And that's so when the client's looking at his building, he's going, how much can I keep or get rid of or whatever in order to get a pass with my planning permission. So I think that's, the more of the building you can keep, the more you're going to get a tick. The more you want to destroy and take the whole thing down, the harder transit you're going to have through the planning system. So the planning system is actually unofficially doing the work that legislation is not happening. It's kind of legislation by the back door, right? In a sense.
Okay.
And I think, as that tightens up, which it is actually tightening up, it's making people consider, well, we can't just keep the basement anymore.
Right.
We've got to keep the frame. So that's definitely something that's changing the London.
Okay. John?
Could I use this platform to make a compliment, right? So we got Mr. Circularity from a glass perspective here. And I remember having a conversation with David 3.5, 4 years ago in Paddington Basin about how do we do all of this? And, and David in the glass world, I think, has dragged the whole industry to a whole new level. And he's kind of done it on his own, okay, with a wider team and the backing of a fabulous business, but he's a man. You need to be complimented for doing that. But there needs to be more Davids, and I think we're talking at a new level now. And again, it goes back to education. We can't do that unless we understand what we're talking about. But in all the negativity that we kind of look at from a circular perspective, I just think there's huge optimism there as well. That we are getting there. We're doing good work and doing better work than probably we would see around the world. So to give it some idea,
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I mean, everyone seems to be in agreement with that.
David.
So if we're serious about circularity, we probably have to talk about materials. David, how recyclable are facade materials such as glass and aluminium in reality? And
we can speak about glass. I mean, okay, we have the aluminium guy here, so I'll steal his thunder.
Okay, so we'll concentrate on glass. Are we creating the infrastructure needed?
Yes,
to support circular.
So you can talk about aluminium now. Yes,
right. Yes.
So as a business, since 2001, in the UK, we've recycled external glass 1 million tons.
Wow.
Since 2001. That's just in the UK. So it's phenomenal. And a lot of that is residential. And the commercial glass has only come on in the last 3.5 years, really, at scale.
Right.
So it's something that's run in the UK and wider. It's run through the business. But I think for the commercial clients, we just had to make, it's a totally different way of getting the glass back to single family dwellings, residential market. So that's kind of Anyway, that's where my sainthood comes from, apparently. The commercial markets, which is a lot harder because the sizes are bigger. The makeup of the glass is much more complex.
Okay.
But we now have a robust reverse supply chain that works, and we can persuade clients to do it, even on the fear of missing out, because we now got so many clients in London that are doing it actively. The minute somebody goes, well, I'm not sure this is possible, we go, well, it works for British Land, it works for the States, it works for Great Britain States, and they go, oh, I should probably rethink it then. So that's a very wise decision.
But the clients and specifiers that are demanding this, in your opinion?
Demanding? Probably
too
strong a word.
Okay, are they requesting it enough?
If the time cost things work on the job enough, and it doesn't always, not always cost neutral, but it's close. As close as we can get it, the more likely they are to say yes.
Okay.
And the thing is, again, I think we have a particular opportunity in central London, because if you're in the country, you can almost rip a facade off the front of the building onto the ground and just put it in bins and take it away. You can't do that in central London. So you're already in a situation where you have to be a little careful on what you do.
Yeah.
So we're just taking that another step, because the deconstruction already has a level of complexity. So I think this is one question that we talked about, is London a unique case?
Right.
And because we've got the London plan, which does help. We've got clients that have got high value buildings, that helps. We've got the complexity of small sites that are difficult to get to, that you can't just pull the glass off. So that helps too. But I think those principles are really important. And then maybe that's the legislation that pushes it to make everybody do it.
Do you think the wider audience will understand what you mean by reverse supply chain?
I don't know.
This audience, yes.
Yeah. No, but yeah. Do you want maybe explain that, David? Yeah.
I mean, providing you understand the concept of supply chain in the first place, it's obviously all the key parties that contribute, in a chain to put a facade onto a building. So a reverse supply chain would be, well, who's going to take it off? Who's going to handle it? Who you can deal with logistics? So there's planning, logistics, material movement, the cost, all those things. So that's all happening in then reverse, but your reverse supply chain. So
Was that an adequate explanation?
David. Yeah.
And it may not involve facade industry.
Correct. Yeah. I thought he might have said it.
sorry. Thank you. Yeah, correct. It wasn't perfect as you said.
Would you like to expand upon that? Ron is a young chap with learning to look after.
Would you like to expand upon that?
Yes, I was actually very keen to contribute to the initial question, but yes, I mean, there's an important aspect there to be explored, which entails, a different timing during the construction of the building, which therefore does include the deconstruction of what we have there already. And deconstruction tends to happen very early in the process, and therefore, you may talk to demolition or deconstruction companies rather than main contractors and or facade specialists company. So it is an entirely different set of players with entirely different challenges there. They do relate, as David correctly pointed out, to logistics matter in particular. So the granularity of how you actually make it happen on a building site, whether that be in London or outside London, are entirely different. So it's separated in a particular manner. You could even go into the discussion of the workforce that is involved and the skill set that is required and so forth.
Right.
For me to go back to your question about the circularity, I think we do need to recognize that every time we talk about, I think we associate too much circularity with recycled materials, and circularity is not. Recycling materials is not circularity. It's part of it. Okay, it's the whole life cycle that we need to think about. Earlier on, you said it goes back into the cycle. We should be thinking about that cycle, not stopping there, but doing it over and over again. And we're not. Sadly, whenever we talk about, despite and I recognize that the tremendous progress that has been done because of pleasure on this table, and I'm privileged that I'm here with them. we've changed the industry. You know, you have changed the industry. We are now talking about a topic and in depth that 6 or 7 years ago was not on our agendas. Okay, it wasn't spoken at conferences, and now it is fully embedded in what we do. That needs to be recognized. Having said that, we need now to really look at the whole picture. And whilst it is great that we can now recycle different type of glass, that we can access low carbon aluminum and even lower carbon aluminum products, we need to think about that facade that we're designing today when we go back to our offices 40 years from now. And you need to put that into a context that I don't know what the world is going to be in 40 years, what the requirements are going to be, what users will want to. It is a very difficult topic. We should, and to address that, we need to build in the flexibility and the adaptability that will enable that facade to respond to something, to a problem that we don't even know exists now. That's the real challenge. And so you need to build it in. You need to move from complex systems to a Lego or a Meccano system. Probably all too young to remember what a Meccano system is, right? Very good. You are. Yeah, you are. And yet it is, you know, it was invented in 1900, so, you know, it's been there for some time, but, you know, something that you can really easily dismount and reuse. Yeah, we need to build that in. Yeah. We're still, you know, we're very proud now that we can take glass away, smelt it into new glass for another job. Really, we should be designing glass now that at the end of that job, I can take it and put it into another building as it is, or cut it down for that.
Aluminium does exactly that. So, I mean, just look, we just clap the whole thing up with aluminium. The challenge to get some transparency.
We don't think about a unitized facade, Benedikt. Think about taking a stick system apart and reuse the same aluminum, the same volume, the same transfer.
We are doing this, yeah.
And you may need to accept there may be a few holes in the wrong place, or more. You design all buildings so that the holes are all in the same place, and oversimplifying.
But that's all where we need to be. This all comes back to accountability and responsibility.
And design. It really, this design revolves around design and engineering.
Yeah.
It's a different mindset, right?
We touched on it, but who ultimately owns this long-term facade performance life cycle thinking?
I think that's a really difficult question to answer.
If a facade underperforms 20 years from now, who's accountable? Nobody. Probably the client, the designer, the contractor.
Well, the client don't the manufacturer.
So let's put it in a different way. So you say, let's put it, if we can, let's put a positive spin on that. Let's say it does perform exactly as it is supposed to perform. Let's say 25 years design life for an insulated glass unit. Okay. After 25 years, who is responsible for a facade that has performed as it should? That's what you need to think when you think about sustainability, not the failure. Forget the failure. We've already spoken about it. You next spontaneity to make sure it performs. And then who is responsible? You know, even when it performs better, you know, just think about that. You know, you can say, well, we're just going to refresh it. Okay, refresh it, but who's responsible for that? Maybe it's the whole system that it is wrong. Maybe we need to think about the science and the whole business model in a different manner.
You know, it's just maybe, you know what I'm
thinking, right? Really interested point. A facade is a service. That's what I'm thinking.
Right. Maybe it's what I'm thinking about is we talk about closed loop in the building and in the supply chain, but we talk about accountability and responsibility in a very linear method. Yes. It goes from the top down. So every point, and the weakest, the lowest link always loses because that's how the contracts work. Why does accountability not circularly go back to the developer? Where is that loop in which we all keep each other accountable? Where can that weakest link hold the developer accountable for saying you did not clearly specify that, or the pressure wasn't there on the entire supply chain? So you can spin this in very different ways, and I don't have the answer for it for sure. But again, we talk about circularity, but we still are stuck in very traditional ways of looking at how is responsibility and liability passed down, because that's just very linear.
Okay. And if I may ask, and this is also a reflection of how complex and intricate and maybe dysfunctional the whole, you can say the whole industry, but the whole facade supply chain as a whole in the context of an entire building is. if you strip it down to basic principle, right? If you were on a desert island and it was only, the six of us there, and we need to build something that is going to be there for as long as we can be there, we're all going to be responsible for that, right? Because, and you're going to reuse and recycle everything you can find. Be sure you're not going to throw away anything for a start, and then you're going to reuse and reinvent any material that comes to mind. So that's perhaps the mindset that we need to have when we design buildings, and that's the mindset that we need to have.
Okay.
Because it is a long-term game, and then it becomes circular in terms of accountability and responsibility as well. Perhaps.
Did you see that differently, John or Katie?
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
No, you go ahead.
I think that residual value of facades is an interesting one. And I think from clients that I've spoken to about circularity and wanting to retain as much on their buildings as possible, I think they are getting savvy to the fact that there is value
I agree.
on those facades that they want to recover and they want to profit from in the future.
Right.
So I think there's definitely a different mindset.
But not just profit. Sorry, forgive me, John. Not just profit. I've been very lucky to work on one of our buildings, but for example, treated glass, we know now we can't really recycle it. We didn't use treated glass. I mean, a simple, very simple example, tangible. Then we use it with our client. We told them we're not going to do a change it. We worked with a facade consultant, changed the whole thing, solar calculation, the whole thing to make sure that we wouldn't use it. Now, you could argue that in 40 years' time, maybe 30 years' time, maybe we will be able to recycle, who knows. Yeah. But it is a really good principle, to follow. We're going to stick to it, and we're going to be doing the right thing from the inset.
Okay. John?
I think probably what our industry needs is a big disruptor, and facades as a service, at least facades, and this has been talked about for years, but it's happening now in Holland. We know that, but if it becomes a service, and we are leasing, for instance, well, then there's a value. There is a real tangible value.
Yes.
And I can't wait for there to be a disruptor in our industry, and I think maybe it's not too far off, but it kind of maybe just finishes that conversation in terms of where do you see this value, and if it's leased and it's going to be changed, there's value there, and whoever's implementing that kind of new system will see the value in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, everything we've discussed sounds sensible in principle, but projects just don't happen in principle. Saverio, what happens when sustainability ambitions meet procurement budgets, program pressures, and then project tasks?
What happens? Interesting discussions take place, and they happen really early.
Such as what?
Well, such as very simply, but what are the options and where do you want to spend your money?
Right.
That's as simple as that, and have we got the time to do it?
Okay.
Because if you need something tomorrow, your options are limited, right? And that goes with anything, whether you want to book a restaurant or an airplane or buy another facade. Okay, you're limiting your options. So I think what happens is that what should happen should be a set of options with money associated with it and carbon associated with it. I think we're all there, and there's sensible discussions to take place, and with those discussions and decision to drive design, which then in turns drives the whole sustainability piece. But for that facade, that it also applies to other disciplines.
Does lowest cost still win, or we beyond?
Sometime, I think sometime. Yeah, sometime. Right. Times, some clients have different ambition, aspirations, and budgets, and we need to respect that.
Okay.
And so it's not I don't think there's a fit for all.
Are we commercially incentivized to do the right thing then?
I'm not sure.
Right.
I think it leads back to one of the earlier questions. What is the budget allocated to? Is it allocated until the building is handed over? If so, then the cost typically wins. And if you only look at accountability, I'm accountable until it's handed over, and you make the cut there. But you need to budget in the entire life cycle of cost of the building. And all of a sudden, budget discussions are very different, and value can be quantified and proven very different. We are just not there yet. As you said, some clients have that thinking. They have this very long-term thinking of it. They know if I buy cheap, I buy twice, and rectification and maintenance and replacements. I'm not factoring this in, and I'm probably just going to run the whole thing based on claims. But you need to look at your budget from a much more long-term perspective.
Right.
And I think you're right. I mean, some clients, I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with clients that have a phenomenal aspiration and they stick to it and we deliver to that. But apart from the specific clientele, let's say, as an industry, that's the whole point, you know, what does your capital expenditure really cover?
Yeah.
Is it, you know, do we really look at a facade cost, let's say £10 million, and that means for 60 years, or do you look at £10 million when I give you the key at practical completion? Exactly. Because really, we always look at the cost of a facade per square meter or in total for that facade. You never look 50 years or 60 years design life for that.
Okay, so John, who ultimately pays for better life cycle decisions?
Good question. I think when you look at follow the money, and it's the client, but then it's the funders as well. And there's I'm seeing an interesting shift where maybe 3 years ago we saw funding and capital markets being very green driven. I think with geopolitics the way it is at the moment, there's a shift. So obviously that, particularly in the US, maybe we're not seeing a focus on sustainability as it was before. And people are saying, well, that's very specific to the US, but in actual fact, it's not. The funds that are driving a lot of our developments, the focus is shifting. So I would have said 2-3 years ago, we were in a good place. I see a shift. I see less emphasis on sustainability now, not just in the UK, but wider Europe and then around the world. And that's coming from North America at the moment. So
it's being sacrificed for program and budget and sustainability.
And less emphasis, if you can look at it from that perspective. So there would have been a very, very big emphasis 2-3 years ago. I'm just seeing a shift.
Right.
And
Is it flattened or is it decreasing?
I think it's slightly decreasing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which is a worry, and I suppose that's where the geopolitics of all that this comes in, and way above my pay scale. But I'm just seeing that at the moment.
The global consideration is actually a very interesting one. We shouldn't be thinking just locally. We should be thinking globally, because some of the products that may not be reusable, not recyclable, reusable here may be perfectly acceptable somewhere else in the world.
Okay.
So, if you take a wider view, here you have a far better option, and you will really fit into a much wider circular economy solution, right? So if you smart with selling London, we can reuse it somewhere else. But okay, it may not be performing well for London, but it may be perfectly acceptable for a different climate.
Okay.
Do we really think about that?
I mean, Katie, are we doing enough today to avoid creating the life cycle and sustainability problems of tomorrow, or are we sort of simply repeating the mistakes of the past?
Oh, that's a hard one.
That's why you're answering it first, then it's you.
Yeah, I think if you're on a project, when you're on a project, I think the question you should be asking is, can a future team, looking at your built building, identify the system, gain access to fix things, perform maintenance on it, assess, find clarifications, all of those things. And if they can't, then yes, you are. And I think that's that, thinking about that future team, that future person in charge of disassembly or maintenance. If you're making their life harder,
Right.
then yes, you are contributing to the problem.
Sure. David?
I mean, I function in a very small niche sort of commercial developers in London, and I would say there's no going back.
Right.
But I understand the wider situation, and I clearly see in the mass market that is exactly the case. But within my little niche, that there's no going back. That this thing is moving, and it will keep moving.
Okay.
Now we've made it work for clients. They bought into the idea. They love the idea, and it will not stop.
Okay. Are we behind the curve anywhere that you're seeing?
I think we have to define the curve.
Right.
Okay. What's the curve? Very deep, I know. But no, just following up on something you said earlier in terms of there needs to be a mind shift, a shift in the mind. The question is what shifts the mind, right? What is the trigger point that makes you then shift the mind? And a lot of the companies we work for, they are very long-term oriented. They have very high standards on the future, on the vision, where they want to go, how they are responsible to society. But typically those that don't have that, their minds are only shifted by painful experiences, or by short-term incentives. So either a lot more bad stuff needs to happen, which we all don't hope, or there needs to be more incentive, more short-term. But I think a lot of what we are all working for currently is about being better ancestors and driving things long-term. So yeah, I think we are as a whole not doing enough right now, except for those pockets that we are seeing it. And yes, those pockets can be geographical. If you look in downtown London, it very quickly dilutes and disperses outside of that. But to your point, I agree. I think that freight train has started and it will not stop. But it might change and adapt along the way, as you just said, in terms of demand maybe flattening a bit or decreasing slightly. So yeah, still a long way to go.
Well, Saverio, about honour, as Benedikt mentioned, uncomfortable truths that we're avoiding.
Yes, I mean, your question was about are we repeating mistakes? And I think we are, as we make facade more complex. It should go the other way around. And I've only seen facade getting more and more complex. The best part. Even as a result of climate change, for example, we'll think about, if you start building in, again, all the simplifying here, but if you start building in pre-soleils and integrated blinds and so on, your facade complexity increases, right? And as the facade complexity increases, your circularity and circular economy is going to be negatively affected by that. So the simpler you keep it, the more chances you have for that to happen.
Okay.
And so yes, we are making mistakes. In fact, if anything, we're actually increasing the chances of making even more than
just expanding. Yeah, just expanding on that. Where is the industry kidding itself then?
I think the UK market feels that it is probably the best market in the world, and just having, let's say, traveled a bit and done work in various other regions around the world, there are pockets of facade intelligence, if you want to call it, that's far beyond, I feel, the UK market. So maybe we need to learn from other jurisdictions and what's going on there, and taking the best bits and bringing it back here. But what I'm encouraged about is, let's say, our society of facade engineering community that's opening hubs all over the world. We're starting to get that information and hopefully start to bring it back here. So we need to continuously challenge ourselves, and we need to continuously learn. And I keep coming back to education. I think it starts there. Need to get young people into the industry. You don't have enough young people. We need to get more and more in.
present is cruise.
Huh? Yes.
Present is cruise.
Yes, obviously, yeah. But unfortunately, there's a few people sitting around the table that have installed buildings that are now being refurbished 20 grand. And that's hard. Not me and not Casey, but some others. Maybe some others this side of the table. But
It's a really interesting point. Perhaps it's a good place to look ahead to what's coming And we spent a lot of time talking about the challenges and what needs to change over the next decades. I mean, if we're serious about creating a more sustainable facade industry, what becomes unavoidable going forwards? This is to everyone.
There needs to be a marketplace and an infrastructure for reuse to avoid those recycling.
Yeah.
Like
The reuse.
like aluminium are great, but trying to avoid that for as long as possible.
Okay.
So yeah, well developed systems for doing that.
I'm going to add on to what John said. Please say about that, the disruptor. You need a disruptor. And John pointed out, the globality of the SFE, and we're also working towards that with the CWCT, trying to expand and bring in knowledge and further collaboration beyond the UK. We also need to look at other industries. The example of a car, the example of Lego and Meccano, I think are interesting one, but let's look at what other industries are doing to change the status quo.
Okay. Is that for one change, the biggest change you think will make the biggest impact?
I think the biggest change will be the reuse, the focus on reuse.
Right.
Because that is at the core of the whole circular economy. And I'm choosing that terminology very specifically and not just circularity.
Okay.
That's the biggest one. That I think that would be an aid. Okay, looking at other industry and look at it globally, it'll be a really good tool or vehicle to make it happen.
Okay. And David, what gives you some optimism?
Life.
I like it. Benedikt.
Yeah, same. Oh, still. I think my answer to this, especially looking at the future, is the main change in terms of disruption needs to come from more corporates, industry bodies going on that journey that all of us are on. So we need more skin in the game, more stakeholders. None of us is allowed to break that mold either. Yeah, so you cannot give in to lower cost pressures. So that is tempting always, but we just need more of that. And then again, I don't think we can really drive this by ourselves bottom up at scale. So I come back to legislation that needs to change, incentives and penalties. I don't really see that enough to drive that change. And I like the points we touched on in terms of accountability, that a lot of knowledge and experience in this group, but nobody had a clear answer to that.
No.
But that's again where legislation ties in a little bit to define that accountability further. So structural change still needs to happen.
Katie?
Following on from what John said about competency and education, I think that's really important. Yeah. And I don't think it's necessarily just about training the next generation of facade engineers. I think that competency needs to be spread out into our other stakeholders' routes. We need to make architects understand the language, have some degree of competency there, so that they understand where we're coming from in trying to minimise the complexity of their systems for the designs that they are proposing. And same goes with MEP as well. But there needs to be more of a kind of a root understanding when it comes to design.
Okay.
So perhaps in a nutshell, it's a shift, the fundamental shift, apart from cultural values and so on. Maybe we need to shift from performance oriented discussion to all life discussion. Because with performance, it kind of tend to limit it to the today, the now. How is it going to perform right now? Yes, 50 years, but if you start focusing on all life, then maybe a bit of a helicopter view, but that will probably drive change quite a lot.
So don't have any final...
I mean, I wouldn't say something more than just life that gives me... if that's okay.
No, I thought it was
perfect.
It was very final. We could have started and ended it there.
And Debbie, if I may, Boost Life, you're also future generation.
That's way too deep for me. Try. Thanks. Appreciate it. I think the thing that gives me optimism is the fact that there's enough people who are going on this crazy journey with us, and I think we just got to encourage each other.
Okay.
Because I just think we do function in a very sometimes quite negative field, And I think we've just got to cheer each other on. I think the mutual encouragement, support, I think has real value, has such value. And I think we appreciate it because I think so often we work in our little spheres, and yet, we should just be championing each other. And then we should also be through education and everything else, championing then the generation that's following us, so they don't keep repeating the same mistakes.
Okay.
So I do feel optimistic about that, because I think things will happen and things can amazingly change very quickly in certain situations. And I think again we live in this place of tension between we can't rely on technology to come and save us because technology we don't have today or ways of working we don't have today. We can't rely on it, but equally there are things that can happen that can suddenly change situations in an instant. So I live in a lot of places of tension, but I'm comfortable in that place of tension. But I still feel optimistic in it.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully today's discussion is the start of a wider conversation rather than the end of one. I'd like to thank everyone for their honesty, your perspectives, for contributing to what I think is a really important discussion for our industry.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having us too.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. It's Thank you.
Awesome.